Given that its motto is food with integrity, you'd think Chipotle Mexican Grill and its fast casual cuisine would have a sterling reputation. But the popular chain has struggled in recent years with disappointing sales, customer backlash, and several bona fide outbreaks. What the heck happened? Well, today we're going to take a look at everything wrong with Chipotle. But before we get started, be sure to subscribe to the Weird History Food channel. After that, please leave a comment and let us know what other eateries you would like to hear about next. Okay, time to Chipotle it on you. Intuition might suggest that a place with a name like Chipotle Mexican Grill was founded by someone with a meaningful connection to Mexico and its culinary heritage. But intuition would be extremely wrong on that count. Chipotle was founded by Steve Ells, an American businessman who was born in Indianapolis, Indiana, and educated at the University of Colorado at Boulder, and later the Culinary Institute of America. He graduated from the latter in 1990, and then went to work as a sous chef at a famous San Francisco restaurant called Stars. After 2 years of that, however, he felt ready to start his own business. He borrowed $85,000 from his father, and on July 13, 1993, he opened the first Chipotle at 1664 East Evans Avenue in Denver, right near the University of Denver campus. The original concept for Chipotle was inspired by the kind of taquerias and burrito shops that were then common in San Francisco, but basically unknown in Colorado. These places offered the speed and convenience of fast food, but with fresher and higher quality ingredients, or what we now refer to as fast casual dining. Ells settled on the name Chipotle, the Nahuatl word for a smoked and dried jalapeno chili pepper, after trying his first Chipotle burrito and being surprised at how good it was. His friends and family did not like the name and were worried that people would not know what a Chipotle is, or how to pronounce it. But as we now know, that wasn't going to be a problem. Chipotle was a massive success right off the bat. In fact, within just a month of opening, Ells was already selling 10 times as many burritos a day as he needed in order to pay back his loans. However, that kind of success was never part of Ells' plan. In fact, he considered Chipotle just a short-term solution for making enough money to buy himself a fine dining restaurant, and maybe have a backup in case that restaurant failed. According to the man himself, over the subsequent 2 years, he felt guilty every time he opened Chipotle up for business, because he wasn't following his true passion in life. But as the money started rolling in,
ooh, guacamole!
It eventually dawned on him that burritos were his true destiny. The menu at that original Chipotle was a lot simpler than the one they have today. There were no salads, no quesadillas, no burrito bowls, no barbacoa, and not a single vegan sofritos to be found. It was just tacos, fajitas, and burritos. Fillings included chicken, pork, and beef, as well as beans, salsa, guacamole, peppers and onions, and lime cilantro rice. Local sources were used as often as possible for those fillings, and some were even made in-house. Much as they are now, meals at the original Chipotle were made to order as the customer looked on. Those meals cost an average of $5 back in '93, which adjusted for inflation is the same as about $11 today. And customers were all over that deal. Within just 4 short years, Ells had 14 separate locations in the Denver area that were making in the neighborhood of $18 million a year. Chipotle's meteoric success encouraged Ells' father to invest $1.5 million in the business, and Ells himself was able to raise an additional $1.5 million on top of that. But growing Chipotle into the monster chain it is today was going to take a lot more than that. It was going to take the kind of money and expertise that only Ronald McDonald had. So in 1998, Ells reached out to McDonald's and pitched the fast food giant on becoming a minority investor in Chipotle. Ells showed up to his meeting at McDonald's headquarters in Illinois armed with a sample of Chipotle's grub. And the Mickey D's execs liked the food so much, they invested $50 million in Chipotle. Word is, the food was so good it nearly convinced the Hamburglar to end his crime spree. Once they were invested, the McDonald's people taught Ells and his team everything they knew about scaling the growth of a franchise restaurant and how to run a chain that large. And we're talking about McDonald's here, so they knew more about it than maybe anyone else in the universe. Chipotle was ready to go national, and they opened their first location outside of Colorado in Kansas City, Missouri in 1998. And there was no looking back from there. Powered by McDonald's support and the explosion in popularity of fast casual dining during the aughts, Chipotle spread across the nation and would have over 500 locations by 2005. McDonald's parted ways with Chipotle that same year, cashing out for $1.5 billion. That sounds like a lot, but it's been frequently pointed out that if they had held out for just another decade, their investment would have been worth 10 times that. Today, Chipotle has over 3,500 locations worldwide. Prices are relatively higher than they were back in the day, but customers aren't complaining. In fact, it's actually been good for business. How is that possible? Well, in 2013, Chipotle announced that it was going to stop using any ingredients that had been genetically modified. That made their meals more expensive, but it also made their millennial customers happy. In fact, just a year later, sales were up over 17% and net income was up more than twice that. All that buzz has to make one wonder, is Chipotle overhyped? And while that's ultimately a subjective question, there are certainly a lot of people who would say that it is. For starters, Chipotle's food isn't really as healthy as you may think. The average order has nearly 1,100 calories and 2,200 milligrams of sodium, which is almost an entire day's recommended amount. It also contains about 75% of your recommended quantity of saturated fat. And these numbers are pretty much in line with what you'd expect from competitors like Qdoba and Moe's. For what it's worth, the healthiest thing you can get at Chipotle's is actually the salad. But overall, we'd encourage you not to think of it as a health food place. And then there's the fact that if you want guacamole, it costs extra. A lot extra. In fact, adding guac to a burrito can increase the price upwards of $3, give or take, depending on where you are. In fairness, there are reasons it costs extra. For one, it's made in-house, and a given store only makes around 70 pounds worth a day. And the price of ingredients can fluctuate wildly due to economic factors ranging from availability, to weather conditions, to political turmoil. So in the interest of keeping the price of a burrito stable, they sell the guac as an extra. For similar reasons, competing franchises also charge extra for guac in some circumstances. So Chipotle isn't the only offender here. Did you ever try Chipotle's queso? Well, queso is traditionally made with processed cheeses that contain additives which make the final product more consistent. But those additives clashed with Chipotle's whole Food with Integrity brand. So when their queso was launched in 2017, Els had to tell the public, our queso may vary slightly depending on the characteristics of the aged cheddar cheese used in each batch, but using only real ingredients is what makes our food so delicious. The problem was that the queso was not at all delicious. In fact, customers hated it so much the company's stock price tanked. They eventually tweaked the recipe and their queso is still on the menu, but the whole thing left a bad taste in customers' mouths. The same could also be said of Chipotle's union-busting tactics, exposed in 2023 after the company had to pay a six-figure settlement to employees for closing down a location in Augusta, Maine that was trying to unionize. And then there's the apparently shrinking portion sizes, which customers have taken to social media to complain about in just the last year. So, overhyped? You make the call. People generally prefer that the restaurants they frequent are not repeatedly tied to the outbreaks of foodborne illness, which is why it's so weird that Chipotle is still around. They've got a surprisingly poor record in that department. In March of 2008, 22 customers were infected with hepatitis A after eating at a location in San Diego. And the very next month, 400 people were infected by norovirus after eating at a location in Kent, Ohio. Norovirus would make a return appearance in August of 2015, when over 200 people got sick after eating at a location in Simi Valley, California, and then 150 more got it the following December in Boston. And of course, there was the Salmonella outbreak that affected 17 locations in Minnesota in 2015, as well as the outbreak of Clostridium perfringens that affected over 700 people who ate at a location in Powell, Ohio in 2018. But by far, Chipotle's most regular co-pilot is E. coli. The first outbreak happened in October of 2015, when over 20 people were infected by a strain of E. coli after eating at Chipotle's in Oregon and Washington. That number would more than double as new cases appeared in Minnesota, California, New York, and Ohio. Although thankfully no one died, over 20 people did require hospitalization. That wasn't the end of Chipotle's problems, though, because in November of 2015, 5 people also contracted a totally separate strain of E. coli after eating at a Chipotle in Seattle. In 2020, the company would pay a fine of $25 million to resolve criminal charges brought by the Justice Department in connection with all these outbreaks. And while they would blame the outbreaks on employees who didn't follow hygiene procedures, they would also spend tens of millions of dollars to upgrade those procedures. So the system was at least partially to blame. New procedures notwithstanding, the damage was done. Locations closed, the stock price plummeted, And in November of 2017, the whole ordeal would finally cost Steve Ellis his job as CEO. He was replaced in 2018 by Brian Niccol, former head of Taco Bell, who was said to have turnaround expertise. That's business speak for guy who's going to get us out of this mess. Whether the harm to Chipotle's reputation is permanent or not remains to be seen, but nobody has contracted E. coli from them in a while. Still, you should probably stay away from the queso. So what do you think? Are you a Chipotle fan or is the food overrated? Let us know in the comments below, and while you're at it, check out some of these other weird history food videos.